I now want to turn to the case of Benyatov in Credit Suisse Securities Europe Ltd, which is a Court of Appeal decision that has just been published in the past couple of days. The facts are that Mr. Benyatov was working in Romania for Credit Suisse as a banker and found himself in the unfortunate position of being placed under house arrest, and that continued till October 2017, when he was permitted to return to England. Mr. Benyatov maintained that he had done nothing wrong and that his treatment, i.e. the prosecution, was politically motivated. Credit Suisse investigated the matter and were quite satisfied that the EMS transactions that he'd been working on were perfectly legitimate and Mr. Benyatov had done nothing wrong. They in fact supported him, paid for his legal fees in the first hearing where he was in fact convicted, and then paid for the legal fees in relation to his appeal against conviction. Nonetheless, that appeal was turned down and he remained convicted of a criminal offence in Romania. Credit Suisse and Mr. Benyatov, of course, being subject to the Financial Conduct Authority's regulatory regime, were obliged to disclose all of this to the FCA, and both maintained that nothing wrong had taken place. In 2015, Mr. Benyatov was made redundant by Credit Suisse, whereupon he left and returned to the USA, but found himself unable to obtain employment anywhere because of the conviction. Mr. Benyatov, who unable to work and earn a living, was clearly very unhappy with what had happened to him and pursued a claim against Credit Suisse. And there were two elements to that claim. He claimed that Credit Suisse had breached a duty of care to protect him from criminal conviction in the performance of his duties in Romania, and that they had breached the implied duty of indemnity towards him, i.e. They should have actually continued to assist him in, i.e. they should have continued to help him with the income loss that he'd suffered due to his inability to obtain alternative employment. The findings of the Court of Appeal were that whilst Mr. Benyatov claimed Credit Suisse owed him a duty of care, that was not the case given these particular circumstances. The test was whether the conviction was reasonably foreseeable, and the Court of Appeal said it was not, and therefore no duty of care towards Mr. Benyatov could be implied in his contract of employment. A number of key facts were relied upon. Romania is not a high-risk country, and therefore the employer was not on notice that there might be something untoward about Mr. Benyatov being sent there, which would lead to potentially his being prosecuted. The second was that the EMS transactions were not regarded as high risk. There were no red flags or amber flags. They were just normal transactions, and Mr. Benyatov was just carrying out his normal day-to-day duties as a banker. There were in fact no risk assessments that were common or standard in investment banking, which assessed whether or not there was any political risk to sending an employee to any particular country, and that's not a normal practice, and therefore again there was nothing that would alert Credit Suisse to the possibility of Mr. Benyatov being pursued in the criminal courts due to any political affiliations he may have had. And one last factor was that the Court of Appeal found that there was nothing about Mr. Benyatov's name or his particular background which would have alerted Credit Suisse to the possibility of his being prosecuted in Romania. So they simply had no idea that this might happen to him, and hence nothing was foreseeable and no duty of care was owed. Whilst there is a duty to indemnify an employee in certain circumstances to hold them harmless, and that, for example, does include the potential of paying for legal costs in defending criminal prosecutions, the Court of Appeal said that that duty does not extend to indemnifying an employee for loss of earnings due to the actions of a third party, in this case the Romanian authorities. So there couldn't be a duty to indemnify Mr. Benyatov for years and years of loss of earnings simply because he wasn't able to work due to the criminal conviction. It hadn't been Credit Suisse's actions which caused that harm.